You know, when the Galactic Council first approved the human exchange program at our prestigious military academy, most of us thought it was some kind of elaborate joke. I mean, seriously? These soft pink creatures from that backwater planet called Earth? The same species that apparently needs 8 hours of unconsciousness every day just to function. We might as well have invited a bunch of jellyfish to attend combat training. But here I am, Senior Tactical Analyst Quindar, documenting what has become the most, well, let's call it educational semester in Academy history. And trust me, after 3 centuries of watching various species attempt to master the art of warfare, I thought I had seen everything. Boy, was I wrong. The Valtharian Military Academy sits on the twin moons of Nexus Prime, where we have been molding the galaxy's finest warriors for over 2 millennia. Our graduation rate? A solid 12%. Our motto? Pain builds character. Character builds legends. Our reputation? Absolutely terrifying. And we like it that way. The Academy's chrome towers stretch toward the stars like metallic claws, and the training grounds have witnessed more broken bones than a hospital ward. This is where the galaxy's elite learn that weakness is not an option. Commander Thek'val ran the most demanding combat training program in the Academy, standing nearly 9 feet tall with scales that could deflect plasma bolts and a temperament that made volcanic eruptions seem calm. He was the stuff of nightmares for most cadets. His track record spoke for itself. 47 years of instruction, 0 tolerance for incompetence, and a collection of ceremonial masks that marked his victories over various species who had dared to challenge Valtharian superiority. The guy literally wore his conquests on his face, rotating through different masks depending on his mood. Today he sported his favorite, the skull-white mask of dominance, reserved for particularly difficult training sessions. When the first batch of human exchange students arrived, we gathered in the observation deck like it was some kind of entertainment. 5 humans total, all looking ridiculously small and fragile compared to our usual recruits. The males seemed nervous, constantly looking around with those strange, shifting eyes. But then there was her. Zara Bennett, 5 feet and 6 inches of what the humans apparently called trouble. Auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Green eyes that seemed to take in everything with an almost predatory assessment, and a posture that suggested she was completely unimpressed by our towering architecture and intimidating atmosphere. While her fellow humans huddled together like frightened prey animals, she stood apart, arms crossed, actually smirking at the welcome hologram that detailed our Academy's glorious history of breaking lesser species. The orientation officer, a particularly pompous centaur named Brix, began his standard speech about Academy protocols. You will address all instructors as commanders or sir. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not question orders. You will not. Excuse me, Zara interrupted, raising her hand like she was in some primitive Earth classroom. Quick question about the whole not questioning orders thing. What if the orders are tactically unsound? The silence that followed was so profound you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. Frix's tentacles actually twitched with shock. Several senior cadets exchanged glances that clearly said, "Did this tiny creature just interrupt orientation?" "I beg your pardon?" Brix managed to stammer. "Well, I was just thinking," Zara continued with a casual shrug. "If we're here to learn military strategy, wouldn't blind obedience kind of defeat the purpose? I mean, back on Earth, some of our greatest military victories came from soldiers who knew when to break protocol. And that, my friends, was the moment we should have realized that our assumptions about humans might need some serious revision. But did we listen to that little voice of wisdom? Of course not. We were far too busy being offended by the audacity of this small, soft creature who dared to question thousands of years of military tradition. Commander Thek'val, who had been observing from the shadows, stepped forward with the deliberate, menacing pace of a predator approaching wounded prey. His mask caught the artificial light, creating an intimidating gleam that had reduced seasoned warriors to tears. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that could stop charging battle cruisers, "you will find that your Earth concepts of warfare are quaint. Here you will learn proper discipline. Here you will learn respect. Here you will learn that questioning your superiors is a luxury you cannot afford." Zara looked up at the towering commander, and instead of the expected cowering or stammering apology, she simply nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough, Commander. I look forward to the learning experience." The way she said it, with that slight emphasis on learning experience, should have been our second warning sign. But we were still too busy congratulating ourselves on maintaining proper hierarchy to notice the steel underneath her polite words. Little did we know we were about to get our own education in what happens when you underestimate a species that had clawed its way to the top of their planet's food chain without any natural armor, claws, or telepathic abilities. Just intelligence, adaptability, and a remarkable talent for violence when cornered. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the classroom incident that changed everything we thought we knew about these deceptively fragile humans. 3 weeks into the semester, Commander Thek'val decided it was time to demonstrate why Voltharian combat doctrine had remained unchanged for centuries. The training hall buzzed with nervous energy as 47 cadets from 12 different species arranged themselves in perfect formation. 46 cadets in perfect formation, and one human who seemed more interested in examining the ancient tactical displays than paying proper attention. Today, Thek'val announced, his voice echoing off the metallic walls, we will review the fundamental principles of battlefield superiority. These tactics have secured victory for the Voltharian Empire across 3 galactic quadrants. He gestured to a holographic display showing a classic pincer movement, the kind of strategy that had been standard operating procedure since before humans had discovered fire. The other students nodded with appropriate reverence. Marcus, one of the human males, was frantically taking notes. Elena, another human, kept her eyes fixed on the commander with the kind of intense focus that suggested she was trying very hard not to look confused. But Zara was actually studying the display with what I can only describe as barely contained amusement. The key, Lexobian continued, warming to his favorite subject, is overwhelming force applied through predictable channels. The enemy expects certain responses, and we deliver those responses with superior firepower. Simple, effective, proven. The Zenthore cadet raised a tentacle. Commander, what about adaptive enemies who might anticipate these traditional approaches? There are no adaptive enemies, Thek'val replied with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been proven wrong. There are only enemies who have not yet faced proper Voltharian discipline. When faced with our superior training and equipment, all resistance crumbles. That was when Zara made a sound. Not quite a snort, not quite a snort, not quite a cough, but something that managed to convey skepticism, amusement, and mild disbelief all at once. Every head in the room turned toward her. Miss Bennett, Thek'val said, his tone carrying the warning that had preceded many a cadet's expulsion. Did you have something to contribute to our discussion? Zara looked up from the tactical display she had been examining. Oh, not really, Commander. I was just thinking about how this particular formation would work against an enemy that, had actually studied your tactics. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. A Corvan cadet actually gasped. You have to understand. Questioning tactical doctrine was not just inappropriate at our academy, it was practically heretical. I see, Thek'val said slowly. And I suppose your primitive Earth military has superior strategies to share with us. Well, Zara said, standing up with that casual confidence that humans seem to specialize in. I wouldn't call them superior exactly. Different, maybe. See, this pincer movement you are showing, it is really elegant in theory. Very orderly. Very predictable. Predictability is strength, Thek'val countered. When the enemy knows death approaches, fear weakens their resolve. Sure, if the enemy cooperates, Zara agreed cheerfully. But what happens when they do not stand still and wait to be pinched? What if they say feint retreat, draw your forces into overextension, then hit your supply lines while your pincer is busy trying to close on empty air? The silence that followed was the kind you might experience just before a supernova explosion. Several cadets looked like they were witnessing sacrilege in real time. A few of the braver ones actually leaned forward, curious despite themselves. Thek'val's mask seemed to gleam more intensely. You suggest that discipline and proven tactics are inferior to chaos and improvisation. Oh no, not chaos, Zara said, warming to the subject in a way that probably should have alarmed everyone present. Adaptation. See, on Earth we had this general named Sun Tzu who wrote about appearing weak when you are strong and strong when you are weak. Then we had Napoleon, who said no plan survives contact with the enemy. And then we had more recent strategists, who figured out that the best way to win is to make the enemy fight the war you want, not the war they want. Primitive philosophy from a primitive world, Thek'val dismissed, but I noticed his voice had lost some of its casual confidence. Maybe, Zara shrugged. But this primitive world fought 2 global wars in the span of 30 years, developed weapons that could crack planets, and somehow managed not to extinct ourselves. Well, mostly. We came close a few times, but we figured it out. A Voltharian cadet named Keshtar made the mistake of snickering. Your species almost destroyed itself. This is supposed to be impressive. Zara turned to him with a grin that was somehow both friendly and terrifying. Oh, we did not almost destroy ourselves by accident, buddy. We almost destroyed ourselves on purpose, multiple times. And then we looked at mutual annihilation and said, you know what? Maybe we should try something else. That takes a special kind of crazy that apparently works pretty well when things get desperate. The room had gone completely silent. Even I had to admit, there was something deeply unsettling about the casual way she discussed her species' apparent suicidal tendencies. Thek'val stepped closer to Zara, using his considerable height advantage to loom over her. You speak of desperation as if it were a virtue. True warriors rely on discipline, not the chaotic flailing of cornered animals. Cornered animals, Zara repeated thoughtfully, not backing down despite the fact that the commander now towered over her like a metallic mountain. You know, Commander, that is probably the most accurate description of human combat doctrine I have ever heard. We do fight like cornered animals. The difference is, we have really, really good teeth. The way she said teeth with that sweet innocent smile should have been our final warning. But Commander Thek'val had never encountered a species that treated intimidation as a form of entertainment. He was about to learn. The tension in the room had become so thick you could have cut it with a plasma blade. Commander Thek'val's breathing had shifted to that dangerous rhythm that every Academy veteran recognized as the prelude to an explosion. His massive hands, each one capable of crushing a standard-issue helmet, slowly clenched into fists at his sides. Miss Bennett, he said, his voice dropping to the kind of whisper that made seasoned warriors check their life insurance policies. You seem to believe that your species' chaotic nature makes you superior to beings who have perfected the art of warfare over millennia. Zara tilted her head slightly, studying him with those unnervingly calm green eyes. Not superior, Commander. Just different. See, when you have perfected something, you tend to stop adapting, and things that stop adapting usually end up as museum exhibits. That did it. The last thread of Thek'val's legendary self-control snapped like an overloaded power coupling. His towering frame began to vibrate with barely contained rage, and the ceremonial mask he wore seemed to pulse with reflected fury. Around the room, cadets instinctively took steps backward, recognizing the signs of an incoming detonation. You arrogant, ignorant little creature, he snarled, his voice rising to a volume that rattled the training equipment. You dare stand in this sacred hall of learning and mock traditions that predate your entire civilization. You think your pathetic species' tendency toward self-destruction somehow qualifies you to critique methods that have conquered star systems. Well, when you put it like that, Zara said with devastating calm, it does sound kind of silly. But then again, so does refusing to adapt your tactics because they worked great against enemies who are probably all dead now. Several cadets actually gasped. A Zenthori in the back row started making what I can only assume were prayers to his ancestral gods. Even I felt a chill run down my spine, and I was safely tucked away in the observation deck. Thek'val's control finally, completely, utterly evaporated. Silence, he roared. And before anyone could process what was happening, his massive hand swept through the air in a vicious backhand aimed directly at Zara's face. The slap carried enough force to have sent most cadets flying across the room, and the sharp crack of impact echoed through the training hall like a gunshot. For exactly one heartbeat, everything seemed normal. Thek'val stood there, breathing heavily, his hand still extended from the blow. The other students froze in shock, processing the fact that their instructor had just struck a cadet during what was supposed to be a discussion. But Zara Bennett had not moved. Oh, her head had snapped to the side from the impact. Sure enough, a red mark was already forming on her cheek where Thek'val's hand had connected. But she had not stumbled, had not cried out, had not even blinked. Instead, in one fluid motion that seemed to defy the basic laws of physics, her left hand shot upward with the speed of a striking viper. What happened next occurred so fast that most of the cadets missed it entirely. I only caught it because our observation deck cameras were running at full tactical resolution, Zara's palm connected with the bottom edge of the Kale ceremonial mask with surgical precision, angled upward at exactly the right trajectory to exploit the mask's mounting weakness. The sound was incredible. Not the dull thud you might expect from flesh meeting metal, but a sharp, crystalline crack that seemed to hang in the air like a death sentence. The Kale's prized mask, the white symbol of dominance that had intimidated countless cadets, split down the middle with a sound like breaking bones. Time seemed to slow to a crawl, as the two halves of the mask separated and began their inevitable journey toward the floor. Thek'val's own momentum, combined with the unexpected impact, sent him staggering backward, his hands reflexively reaching for his now exposed face. The mask fragments hit the polished floor with a pair of metallic clangs that echoed through the training hall like funeral bells. And then silence. Complete, absolute, suffocating silence. 46 cadets stood frozen like statues, their mouths hanging open in expressions of pure shock. Commander Thek'val stood there, swaying slightly, his true face revealed for the first time in decades, and Zara Bennett straightened up, absently rubbing her cheek where his slap had landed, looking for all the world like she had just swatted an annoying insect. "Well," she said into the deafening quiet, her voice perfectly calm and conversational, "I guess that is one way to test reaction times." I am not sure what was more terrifying in that moment, the fact that a human had just broken our most feared instructor's ceremonial mask, or the fact that she seemed completely unsurprised by her own actions. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the Academy's life support systems, and what sounded suspiciously like someone in the back row having a minor cardiac episode. And that, my friends, was when we all realized that our understanding of human capabilities might need some serious revision. The Academy's emergency response system activated faster than a hyperspace jump. Within seconds, the training hall's blast doors sealed with the kind of finality usually reserved for containment breaches, and security drones descended from hidden ceiling compartments like mechanical vultures. The automated voice of the Academy's AI began its standard lockdown protocol. Code 7 incident detected. All personnel remain stationary. Security response in progress. Captain Nethera, head of Academy security, materialized in the doorway with a squad of armed guards before most of us had even processed what had just happened. She was a veteran Korvan warrior, whose reputation for swift, decisive action was legendary throughout the Academy. Her forearms were already reaching for various weapons as her compound eyes swept the scene searching for threats. Then she stopped. Just stopped. Because there was Commander Thek'val, standing in the middle of his own training hall, mask fragments scattered at his feet like the remnants of his authority, staring at a human female who barely came up to his chest, and looked about as concerned as someone who had just finished a mildly interesting crossword puzzle. "What in the seven hells happened here?" Nethera demanded, her voice carrying the kind of authority that could make black holes think twice. Before anyone could answer, she got her first good look at Thek'val's exposed face, and I watched her expression shift from professional alarm to something approaching awe. You see, none of us had ever seen the commander without one of his ceremonial masks. The man's true features were, well, let me put it this way, 47 years of combat had not been kind to his face. Scars crisscrossed his scaled skin in patterns that told stories of battles fought across the galaxy. His left eye was milky white from an old plasma burn, and his jaw was slightly crooked from where a Zentari warrior had nearly ripped it off during the border wars. But it was not the scars that made everyone step back. It was the expression. For the first time in recorded Academy history, Commander Thek'val looked genuinely confused. Not angry, not intimidating, not even particularly upset. Just puzzled, like he was trying to solve a complex mathematical equation that kept changing variables. And he began, then stopped, one hand still reaching toward where his mask used to be. How did... Zara, meanwhile, had turned her attention to Captain Nethera with the kind of polite interest you might show when meeting a neighbor's visiting relatives. "Oh, hi there. I am guessing you are security. Sorry about the mess. Things got a little heated during the tactical discussion." "A little heated?" Nethera repeated, her voice climbing several octaves. "You destroyed a ceremonial mask of dominance. Do you have any idea what those things are worth? What they represent?" "Actually, no," Zara admitted cheerfully, "but I am guessing it was expensive, and probably pretty important to him, judging by how everyone is looking at me like I just kicked a puppy. In my defense, he hit me first." The security captain's eyes swiveled toward the Thek'val, who was still standing there like a statue of confused authority. Commander? Is this accurate? Thek'val's functioning eye focused on Nethera with visible effort. Yes. I struck her. She was being insubordinate, disrespectful. I lost my temper and... He gestured helplessly at the mask fragments. And I defended myself, Zara added, matter-of-factly. Standard human reflexive response to sudden physical aggression. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? Professor Velthar, the Academy's senior tactical instructor, had arrived with the security team and was staring at the scene with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching supernovas. Miss Bennett, you just disabled one of the most formidable warriors in the Academy with what appeared to be a casual gesture. Zara looked genuinely surprised by this assessment.
Disabled?
I just broke his mask. It was not like I was trying to hurt him. Human combat reflexes are designed for threat neutralization with minimal necessary force. He slapped me, so I neutralized the threat by removing his intimidation factor. Basic de-escalation technique. The room fell silent again as everyone processed this explanation. It was Professor Velthar who finally found his voice. Miss Bennett, he said slowly. Are you telling us that breaking Commander Thek'val's mask was your idea of restraint? Well, yeah, Zara replied, looking around at the sea of stunned faces like she was missing something obvious. I mean, I could have gone for his throat, but that seemed like overkill for a classroom disagreement. The mask thing was more of a hey, maybe we should all calm down kind of move. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as the implications of her words sank in. This human had not just gotten lucky, or caught Thek'val off guard, or benefited from some kind of equipment malfunction. She had deliberately chosen the exact amount of force necessary to end the confrontation without causing serious injury, and she had executed that choice in the space of a heartbeat. Captain Nethera was clearly having similar thoughts. Miss Bennett, exactly how fast are human combat reflexes? Zara considered this question with the kind of seriousness you might give to choosing lunch. Depends on the human and the training, I guess. Average reaction time for a trained human is somewhere around 0.15 seconds for visual stimulus. Add in muscle memory and threat assessment, you are looking at maybe 0.2 seconds from stimulus to response. Why? Professor Velthar was frantically calculating something on his personal datapad. When he looked up, his expression had shifted from fascination to something approaching respect. Commander Thek'val's strike occurred at approximately 1.7 meters per second, he announced to the room. Miss Bennett's counterstrike was executed before his hand had completed its return trajectory. From a purely tactical standpoint, her response time was... He paused, checking his calculations again. Impossible, according to our understanding of biological limitations. Oh, Zara said, finally beginning to understand why everyone was staring at her. Right, I guess you guys do not know much about human combat physiology. See, when we get hit, our brains do not really ask permission before responding. It is kind of an automatic thing. Millions of years of evolution trying to keep us from getting eaten by things with bigger teeth. She looked around the room at the assembled alien faces, all of whom were regarding her with a mixture of awe, respect, and what I can only describe as healthy wariness. So, are we going to restart the class, or should I expect to fill out some kind of incident report? The Academy Tribunal convened 3 days later in the Hall of Judgment, an intimidating chamber where the carved faces of legendary warriors stared down from obsidian walls like disapproving ancestors. 5 senior officials from different species sat behind a crescent-shaped bench that had witnessed everything from court-martials to declarations of war. The whole setup was designed to make even the most hardened criminals feel like insects under a microscope. Zara Bennett walked in wearing a standard Academy uniform, looking about as nervous as someone waiting for a bus. She took her position at the defendant's podium with the same casual confidence she had shown when breaking the Thek'val's mask, which probably should have been our first clue that this tribunal was not going to proceed according to standard protocol. Admiral Kextan, an ancient Valtharian whose scales had turned silver with age, presided over the proceedings. His voice carried the weight of centuries when he spoke. Yosbia, Cadet Bennett, you stand accused of assault against a superior officer, destruction of ceremonial property, and, he paused, consulting his datapad with obvious confusion, creating an unprecedented diplomatic incident that has forced us to completely reevaluate our species classification protocols. That last one was not really intentional, Zara offered helpfully. I was just trying to participate in class discussion. By destroying Commander Thek'val's mask of dominance, Admiral Kex's tone continued, his tone suggesting he was still having trouble believing his own words. In self-defense, Zara clarified, after he hit me, which, by the way, really hurt. Your boy packs quite a punch. A ripple of something that might have been suppressed. Laughter ran through the observation gallery. Commander Thek'val, sitting in the witness section with a temporary mask that somehow managed to look less intimidating than his usual gear, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Professor Velthar stood to present his findings. Admirals, after extensive analysis of the incident, I must report that Miss Bennett's actions, while unprecedented, were entirely defensive in nature. Her response time, precision, and force limitation demonstrate a level of combat sophistication that, he paused, clearly struggling with his own conclusions, that exceeds our current tactical models. Admiral Zephyra, a Zenthare whose tentacles had been twitching throughout the proceedings, leaned forward. Professor, are you suggesting that this human's combat capabilities represent a threat to Academy security? Quite the opposite, Velthar replied, his voice gaining confidence. I am suggesting that her combat capabilities represent an opportunity for Academy advancement. Miss Bennett demonstrated tactical awareness, threat assessment, and proportional response under pressure. These are exactly the qualities we attempt to instill in our graduates. By breaking ceremonial masks, Admiral Kexton inquired dryly. By neutralizing aggression without causing permanent harm, Velthar corrected. Commander Thek'val suffered no injuries beyond wounded pride. His mask, while irreplaceable from a sentimental standpoint, was ultimately just decorative armor. Miss Bennett could have targeted his throat, his eyes, or any number of vulnerable points that would have caused serious injury. Instead, she chose the one target that would end the confrontation immediately while ensuring her opponent's safety. The tribunal members exchanged glances that clearly said they were dealing with something far outside their normal experience. Finally, Admiral Kexipon turned to Commander Thek'val. Commander, you initiated physical contact with Cadet Bennett.
What is your assessment of the situation?
The Gavel stood slowly, his temporary mask catching the chamber's artificial light. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual thunder. Admirals, I have served this academy for 47 years. I have trained warriors from species across the galaxy. I believed I understood combat, strength, and tactical superiority. He paused, his functional eye finding Zara in the crowd. I was wrong. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a quantum particle decay. This human, Vakon continued, demonstrated capabilities that our training protocols never anticipated. Speed that defies our biological models, precision that suggests combat programming, restraint that indicates tactical sophistication beyond her apparent experience level. He straightened his shoulders. I struck a cadet in anger, violating every principle I have spent decades teaching. She responded with exactly the force necessary to restore order while ensuring my safety. Between the two of us, she behaved more like a seasoned warrior. Admiral Kexon sat back in his chair with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been systematically dismantled. Commander Thek'val, are you recommending we dismiss charges against Cadet Bennett? I am recommending we promote her to advanced tactical studies and revise our entire curriculum to account for human combat doctrine. The Gavel replied without hesitation, and I am requesting assignment as her tactical instructor. I have spent 47 years believing I knew everything about warfare. It appears I have been wrong for 47 years. The tribunal deliberated for exactly 17 minutes, which I later learned was the shortest deliberation in Academy history. When they returned, Admiral Kexton looked like someone who had aged several decades in the span of a quarter hour. Cadet Bennett, he announced, the tribunal finds your actions justified under Academy self-defense protocols. All charges are dismissed. Additionally, you are hereby advanced to senior tactical studies and assigned as a special consultant for human combat integration protocols. Zara nodded politely. Thank you, Admiral. Does this mean I still have to attend Commander Thek'val's classes? Miss Bennett, Thek'val interjected. I would consider it an honor if you would attend my classes. I suspect I have as much to learn from you as you might from me. Cool, Zara replied with that devastating casual confidence. Just maybe keep your hands to yourself next time. My reflexes do not really have an academy tribunal setting. And that, my friends, was how the Valtharian Military Academy learned that humans were not the soft, fragile creatures we had assumed. Within a month, our entire tactical curriculum had been revised to include something called adaptive combat theory. Enrollment applications from human candidates increased by 3,000%. Commander Thek'val started wearing a new mask, one that bore the symbol of respect rather than dominance. As for Zara Bennett, she graduated with highest honors and went on to become the Academy's first human instructor. Her specialty: teaching alien species how to fight like cornered animals with really good teeth. The human exchange program, originally intended as a diplomatic gesture to a minor species, became the most sought-after assignment in the galaxy. Because apparently when you spend your entire evolutionary history as prey animals who somehow ended up as apex predators, you develop some interesting survival skills. Looking back on it all, I realize we should have paid more attention to Earth's history before we invited humans to join our military academy. Any species that invented nuclear weapons and then managed not to extinct themselves probably had some things to teach us about warfare. But then again, hindsight is perfect, foresight is terrible, and humans are absolutely, completely, utterly unpredictable, just the way they like it. Note to future xenobiologists studying human integration: never ever assume that smaller means weaker when dealing with a species that survived on a planet where everything was trying to eat them. They tend to take that kind of assumption personally. And trust me, you really do not want to make it personal with a human.